As you're contemplating either adding SAT and ACT prep to your educational practice or looking over what you're already doing, it's a very reasonable question to ask, why can't I just use practice tests? It's quite common for professionals to do some, most, or even all of their preparation out of the official guides produced by College Board and ACT. So if you're thinking about using the official SAT study guide or the official ACT prep guide as the foundation of your instruction, you are right to prioritize the value of official test material. That's really important. Students want to be working on problems that reflect the tests themselves, and going to the tests themselves is really valuable. So yes, there's something to be said for using practice tests. They're easy to implement. Students can order them online really easily. My local Barnes & Noble has an entire shelf dedicated just to those two books. They're bestsellers. You know, they sell a million copies a year each. And most students may already have them by the time you start to encounter them. They're well-known, well-respected documents. They are not terribly expensive. You can buy your own book for less than $30. Your students can buy their own books for less than $30 each. It starts to add up for each student, but they are important. And even if you're working with a dedicated curriculum, you may want your students to pick those books up anyway. Another benefit of the official practice tests is that they represent the kind of work that students need to be doing as they approach the official exams. You can easily scaffold from individual items in a section to assigning timed sections as homework, and then full practice tests. Your practice may include proctored practice tests, in which case you want to use official exams anyway. So there's a lot to be said for using practice tests. However, there is also much to be said against just using practice tests. One of the main criticisms for just using practice tests for your prep program is that they're very disorganized. There is no narrative of all of the math that a student needs to know for the SAT or ACT. There is not a clearly defined list of all the grammar rules that students need to know. If you're working just from tests, you are not necessarily following a particular funnel of general information to specific information. You're going to move back and forth, pick and choose from different items that students see at different times. So you will often find yourself doing much more work than you need to do, spending more time to drill down to the specific areas that students need help because you didn't do a general catch-all. The practice tests themselves don't carry any particular strategies or supports. They are just tests. You still have to bring all of the know-how on how to tackle individual items, sections, and the tests themselves. That has to come from another source. You're not just going to prep according to what College Board or ACT says you should do for the test. They are test makers. They're not test prep professional organizations in the way that students need. Another problem is that if you are going to be using just practice tests, you have to put a lot of work into planning individual sessions. It's not to say that a test review is extra work, because once you've reviewed SAT 10, you can review that any number of times with students. But if you're proposing to prepare a student for ACT reading, you have to have a plan about how you're going to implement different sections of different tests. You're going to have to piece them together, and you may find yourself piecing that together over and over again for students rather than having one defined format. Ultimately, you don't have control over the flow, the order in which students see concepts. You don't have control over the consistency with which they see concepts. You have to add a lot of information to it, and that information that you add will be vocal. You'll verbalize that to students, but they won't have a reference. They won't have a curriculum to look back on and say, oh, this is our strategy for SAT reading. This is our strategy for ACT science items, or how to handle a particular question. This is how we want to handle special right triangles. You'll find, if you've ever experienced an SAT, ACT curriculum, that process becomes so much easier for students. So really, you can base your lessons entirely on practice tests. If you do, you're definitely not alone. But if you're imagining, is there a way to do this more efficiently, more effectively, more easily, and perhaps even inexpensively? The answer is probably yes.